Welcome. I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to this week's Coffee Talk. For those who don't know us, Film Independent is the non-profit arts organization based in Los Angeles, responsible for producing the Film Independent Spirit Awards the day before the Oscars, and a slew of year-round screenings and conversations, panels, and workshops. So you can check us out at filmindependent.org. Membership is open to everyone. So today we are joined by two multi-hyphenates. They are producers, writers, directors, actors, buddies. So first up, here's the writer-director of the highly acclaimed Marcy May Marlene, which won him Best Director at the Sundance Film Festival. The film was also nominated for 3 Spirit Awards, including a Best First Feature and tons of other Critics Awards and Film Festival Awards. He's, as a producer, produced films such as Simon Killer, James White, and Christine. And his latest film as writer-director is The Nest, starring Jude Law and Carrie Coon, which opened in theaters as much as it could in a pandemic a few weeks ago, and debuts on VOD in November, I think. So it's great to have Sean Durkin with us. Hey, Sean, how are you?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Good, not bad.
Good to have you. And joining Sean is his good friend, another multi-hyphenate. You know him from films such as 21 Jump Street, Neighbors, The Lego Movie, Now You See Me, The Disaster Artist, and last year's Best Feature winner at the Spirit Awards, If Beale Street Could Talk. He also wrote and directed his first feature, The Rental, which came out in the summer and hit #1 at the box office. It's a pleasure to welcome Dave Franco. Hey, Dave, how you doing? Unmute your mic, Dave.
I'm muted now. Thank you for having
me. Step up on stage. How you doing?
Yeah, we're doing all right considering, ups and downs, but everyone's healthy and safe. So yeah.
Good days and bad days, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you with us. I know you just grabbed your coffee, so I'm going to grab my coffee. The way these things work is that I'm going to step off stage for about half an hour and let these two guys talk shop and talk about filmmaking for about half an hour. And then I'll come back to take some questions from the audience. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can use that to submit your questions. And I'll come back in about half an hour to filter those out. So Sean and Dave, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Hey, Sean. What's up, man?
How's it going?
Good. Thinking about the best way to start this, and maybe we should talk about how we met.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So as you know, I'm a massive fan of your first film, Marcy May Marlene. And while I was writing my first film, The Rental, that was a huge inspiration for me. And throughout the process, I kept thinking, how cool would it be if we could somehow get Sean Durkin to be a part of our movie. And one day I just tracked down your email and sent you the script, not expecting to hear back ever. And not only did you get back to me, but luckily you were like, you know what, I'm interested in producing this with you. And yeah, it was a dream.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because I basically had thought I was going to stop producing.
Really?
Yeah, I'd spent so many years at Borderline producing and working on other films, and in the years leading up to when you contacted me, I'd had a couple of films fall through, and really felt like I just need to put all of my energy into directing and not think about producing at all, just to get something made again. And
well, this is going to sound like I'm fishing for compliments, but what about this project made you want to produce again?
Well, I was going to say, the first thing was just the script. It was, I read a lot as a producer and as a director, and it just really struck me. And I think the thing that struck close to home was its ambition for wanting to break genre. It's full-blown slasher movie, but it is also a full-blown relationship drama that gets interrupted by the slasher film. And so when I was reading it, that really hit close to home, because it's always what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
There's always like take a couple of genres or use elements of genre to enhance something else. And so it just felt really truthful, really good, really exciting. And then, sat with you and Joe and just felt like a good mix. And
well, what I'll say is that you've become somewhat of a mentor to me through this process, and the best kind of mentor where you never would tell me what to do. You would more just kind of gently guide me in the right direction and let me figure it out for myself.
Well, part of that is that I don't ever think I know, like, I don't ever think that there is an answer. I think it's like so much of filmmaking is doing your own thing and following your own instinct, right? And I don't think anyone can tell you what's best. Like, you, as the filmmaker, you're the one who knows, and you're the one who follows that instinct and has to follow that instinct. And I think the thing that I saw from the very beginning of the script was that, it was like very clear what you wanted this to be. And so in a way, I felt my job was just to support you in seeing that through fully.
Right. Well, I'll say, going off of that, like, I think the main thing that you did for me was, your confidence in me almost was the most important thing, because I respect you so much that I was like, if this guy believes in me, I can do anything. And that was invaluable. And I guess I'm curious, like, if you've had mentors throughout the year or anyone you really turn to creatively, and then I'd love to kind of get into details of what you did for me specifically.
Yeah. I mean, so when Josh, Antonio, and I started Borderline, the whole idea was based around supporting each other, right? So that was the other thing about this. It was sort of easy to slot in because I've been doing this forever. I've been helping my partners make first features, and then made films for other first-time filmmakers. And so we set up our company with this idea that we were going to support each other to do whatever it is that the director wanted to do. And we were going to make it for as high as quality, for as low budget as possible, and just help the director see their vision and make the film, so that at the end of the day, they would have a film, their first film would be everything they want it to be, and none of us could turn back and say, oh, I wish I could have done that, or I could have done that.
Yeah.
And so there was a real camaraderie and support system in that. And I think that's where it really formed. And especially with, learning from making, like, early on with Antonio Campos, I was his cinematographer and producer. I shot his short film. So, like, I got to pick up things from him about directing and working with actors. So we very much had this team. But then beyond that, I had a couple of great mentors. Was a huge support for me.
Say that one more time, you cut out.
Ted Hope.
Got it.
He was an EP on Martha, and just always, like, sort of offered me that same kind of support and encouragement, asked questions of it and pushed it, but was always there to support the movie I wanted to make at the end of the day.
Was there anything specific that you can remember that, like, you almost take with you now for every movie?
No, not really. I think it was just the environment I'd set up with Josh and Antonio, to have Ted Hope come into that, and so much more experience and wisdom, and to just enhance, really was really great, and a lot. And then the other person too is Susan Shopmaker, who's my casting director. I worked for her as an assistant for years.
Wow.
And so I got to be in rooms with great directors working on movies, and just being behind the camera, running camera. And so I got to be in room with, terrible directors who were just, like, not very nice to actors. And I could see actors lose confidence in a room. And so that time with Susan, where she really sort of helped me get on my feet, so to speak.
Right. I mean, it kind of makes sense that you're really close to your casting director too, because just thinking about both of your films, you know, with Martha, Elizabeth Olsen was relatively unknown at the time, yeah. And then looking at The Nest, you know, you have these young actors who I think you said maybe the girl had never acted before.
Yeah, she's Una's. I think this is her first film. She was in school.
Right.
She graduated from school, I think.
And so, yeah, it's these people who, you know, I assume you and your casting director are kind of just looking everywhere and just trying to find the best person for the part, as opposed to trying to find the person with value or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's always a balance, isn't it? I mean, it's like how to find the best people for the role who can, you know, and balancing that with people who can get the film made. But I really lean on my casting director, Susan, and then in England, Beige, have amazing relationships with actors, and they're always just thinking a little differently. And I really trust them, and they always bring me a few people. You know, sometimes we'll do wider searches, but I really just trust them to do what they do, and then it's like an instinct thing. I trust them, and then trust the actors they bring, and yeah, we have a really good thing there.
Well, to turn it around on you, I mean, you gave me a couple of things that I will take with me on every movie. One of them was you encouraged me to do a table read with just me and the actors before we started filming, and the purpose was so we could go through each scene and basically have the actors identify any lines of dialogue or even any single words that felt false to them. And so what it did was, you know, immediately they could start to put it in their own words, and then they could start to kind of take ownership over these characters before we got on set. And so by the time we're on set, it's like we've already talked through all this stuff. We're all on the same page now. And it seems like an obvious thing to do, but it was so helpful.
Yeah, I find that, like, I believe in this sort of like handoff that happens, right? Like when you hand to an actor, I always say, like, these are your words now. Like if it doesn't feel comfortable in your mouth, don't, you know, like, let's change it. And I think, I don't know, I just think it's a great, like, collaborative way to start is that, you know, is that openness.
Yeah, and I imagine, you know, there's got to be certain directors, though, who are very precious with their words if they're also writing the scripts. And I was curious how I would be, and immediately I was the opposite, where, you know, I think the main thing I learned is that when I got to set most days, I would be going through the scenes over and over, and I'd be like, you know what? I overwrote this. We don't need that. Let's just, like, get down to, like, the basics, and yeah.
I always find that, right? I always just, like, overwrite and then just pull away step by step, and even in the editing, right? Like, so much of the editing was just, like,
speaking of, another thing that you gave me in the edit was a really smart thing. Is at one point, I think when we were getting closer to the end of the edit, you asked me, you were like, are there any scenes when you're watching it through, you know, you've watched it 100 times now, are there any scenes where you find your mind drifting? And I really started to think about it. I'm like, yeah, there's these two scenes where every time I just kind of check out. And then we kind of dove into those scenes, and I think really kind of slashed them down and made them to the point where now I got excited to watch them.
Yeah. It's such a like gut-wrenching part of it, where, like, I feel like something stays in an edit for so long because you need it, right? You're like, oh, I need this because of this and because of this. And you have these reasons, but then when you watch it, I'm just like, you know, there's stuff I watch, I'm just over. And it's like that period of, like, intellectualizing versus having the emotional reaction.
Sure.
And I think that's, like, all the way through the process too, a really difficult thing to navigate.
Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to know, just with your second film compared to your first, a couple of things, like, you know, because your first feature was so well regarded, did you feel more pressure going into your second film? And now that the film has come out? Do people compare it to your first film, and is that annoying? And just kind of, say what you will.
Yeah, I didn't really feel pressure because, the other thing is I made this miniseries in England that was 4 hours long. I directed the whole thing, and it was an epic undertaking. And so I didn't really think about like, oh, I haven't done my second feature yet, because I'd done we shot it the same as a film. It wasn't broken into episodes. We shot it consecutively. I mean,
Right.
It felt very much like making a movie. And so when going into this, I didn't think too much about it being a second film. And really, it wasn't until the film was done and it was going to premiere and starting to do press that all the questions about a second film come out. And so it is a weird notion and a pressure that comes with it, and a comparison that comes with it. But I just try to ignore it, because I just always try to be just completely focused on the work itself and completely focused on the thing and making the thing that's in front of you the possible version.
What gave you, like, what were you doing before Martha? Like, what made you so confident going into that to make a movie just solid? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know that I was confident in it. I mean, I was producing a lot, right? So like I produced a couple of movies, and I'd sort of gathered that experience of just, and then, but you know what, I would say, like, the Sundance, I was lucky enough to do the Sundance Lab, and I think I can't imagine where I would have been without that experience of doing the Writers Lab. And
why do you say that?
Well, I think I had very little confidence in myself as a writer. Like I wrote so many, like so before I went to film school, I went to another school, and I was part of what I was going to major in was writing and fiction, and I just would write short stories and just never got a reaction. I mean, my teacher was very sweet, but she'd be like, and then when I got to the NYU, I writing short scripts, and it was like nothing worked. It was so much stuff that I just never got a response from. So I almost like had really, I had no confidence in writing. And so when the script for Martha got accepted to the lab, it was like, oh, maybe I can. And so it was just a, positive reinforcement. And then the process itself really just, it was tough, and you get a lot of tough feedback, but it was good tough. It was just questioning yourself. And I think being forced to ask questions of yourself makes you stronger in what you believe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I had a unique kind of first experience as a director for a few reasons. Like, I've been wanting to direct a feature for a long time. I started maybe a decade ago directing these short films for the website Funny or Die. And I think the reason it took me so long to jump to a feature was, candidly, I was a little bit nervous, just because I knew that there would be this kind of spotlight on me where everyone would be like, let's see what this fucker thinks he can do. And so I think the reason I chose this one as my first feature was, after writing the script and kind of sitting with it for a while, I was like, you know what? I know this thing better than anyone else. And I finally just felt confident, and all the nerves went away. And then what happened was, when I stepped on set that first day, I realized I knew a lot more than I thought I did, because I've been on so many sets as an actor. And it just made me think about how a lot of first-time directors, when they're stepping on set that first day, that might be their first time on any set ever. And so they're learning just about the dynamics between the crew and just kind of how things work on a basic level. And so I felt like I was able to skip a lot of steps because of that. And it just kind of gave me immediate confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask if you, first of all, like, it's an incredible film, but it is like an absolutely astonishing first feature. And and it is so assured. And I remember when we were getting dailies for the first time, I remember like Joe had got caught up on some dailies, and he texted us, and he was like, "This is so good." He's like, "This is intimidating good. How is this so good?" But I felt like it was really incredible to watch. Like for those first dailies coming in, like they just felt so well directed right away. I mean, what I wanted to ask you, do you have any experiences that you drew upon from having all those years, on set as an actor, and good or bad experiences that you drew on should direct?
Right. It's a good question. I think the people that I drew the most from were Seth Rogen and his crew, in the sense that they just create a very comfortable environment on set where they really encourage everyone to speak up and voice their opinions if they think it can help the film in any way. And it just creates this safe space where everyone feels included. And so it just really does feel like a nice collaboration. And so I really tried to bring that energy to mine. And I think the smartest thing I did, aside from bringing you on as a producer, is I really vetted the crew in like a very extensive way, where I wanted multiple glowing reviews about each person before I kind of brought them on. And it was a long, arduous process, but in the end, I was just surrounded by all these really talented people. But in addition to that, like I wanted people who were going to be very just nice people who were going to work their asses off, because as a first timer, I just needed those types of people who just the movie was their number one priority, as opposed to some people who have maybe been around a while who maybe just see it more as a job and they just want to get through the day and get home.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's for me, it's the only way to make a movie. I mean, it doesn't get to happen every time, but as much as you can control that, I agree. I think creating an environment where everyone is there cares about it as much as you do.
Yeah.
It's that emotional investment. It just creates a family, it creates a team, and it's the support system you need, to know that everyone's passionate.
Yeah. It reminds me of something else you would tell me throughout the process too, is you would say that directing can be very lonely. And I think I know what you mean by that, but do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because I've had experiences of just like great producers, great support, great emotional support, great editors, like all of the kind of intimate relationships you have along the way have all been really great. But I think the sort of loneliness of being a director can actually be a result of that, when I find there's moments along the way where I have, maybe producers who I absolutely love and respect, or, editor or something, or someone, and something is going, we're exploring a note or going somewhere and it feels right and everyone thinks it's right, but there's something that I feel in my gut that just isn't necessarily where I want to go with it.
Sure.
And so it can be very confusing when everyone around you
mm-hmm.
is saying like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's try this, let's go there. And you just have this red light going off in your head and you don't know why. And at the end of the day, I believe being a director is following your gut. And when your gut is telling you that's not right, even though everyone you trust is saying it is, that can be very lonely and very difficult. And you can end up making some decisions that go against, people you completely respect and trust. And that's really challenging.
I have a very dumb example of that. So do you remember, okay, so there's a dog in the rental and we found this cute French bulldog, and the dog's name in real life is Chunk. And I was like, oh, I love that name. It was like this big chunky bulldog, French bulldog. And I also was thinking, it's an homage to the Goonies, which was one of my favorite movies growing up, and we're shooting our movie on the Oregon coast just like the Goonies did. This is perfect. This is kismet. And then I realized that there's this long sequence in the film where the dog goes missing. And all the characters are yelling out for the dog. And I realized all the characters during what's supposed to be this tense sequence are going to be going, Chunk, Chunk. And I was like, is this going to undermine the tension? Yeah. And all the actors and the AD and everyone was like, no, Chunk's so good. You got to keep it.
How could you not keep it?
And then I remember I texted you and I was like, dude, what do you think of this? And you're like, no.
wrong reference, wrong moment.
And I swear to God, it got to the point where the actors, when I told them, I was like, you guys, the dog's going to be named Reggie. They were so upset that they were like, no, let us audition yelling for Chunk in like an earnest, real way. But I totally understand what you're saying, where yeah, it's amazing to be in a position where you do have kind of the final say, but at the same time, it is scary too when, like you said, all these people around you who you do trust are saying something else, and you need to make that decision, and your gut's telling me, I don't agree with what they're saying.
Yeah, and also like it's such an emotional process. Like I certainly find that I just doubt myself all the way through. So like I can be very confident and clear and know what I want it to be. I know I'll get there in the end, but process, like there's just, low points where you come home and you're just like, what is this? This is nothing. I don't know what I've done here. And there's so many months of that. And so especially when you're at that low phase of not understanding what it is you're making, or you've lost touch with what you started out, or whatever that part of the process you're in, like that becomes even trickier. So you don't, like, I know that I don't have that like confidence all the time. So I have to sort of get in touch with that confidence. But in the end, like I always know, and I look back and say, okay, I did everything exactly as I wanted. And the other thing is like having the right people to support that too. The other thing, I'm very lucky in the situations I've been in where everyone is, the people I work with have my back, even if we have a slightly different idea.
Definitely. So, and
crucial.
Yeah, going off of that, I feel like I got pretty lucky too, because my wife was in the movie, and so at the end of the day, I would go home to her, and there were many moments where I started to doubt myself, and I would get in my head, and she was always there to just kind of build me up in the right ways and remind me we were doing good work in a way that no one else really could. She knows me better than anyone. And when she says something, I believe it. And I honestly don't think I could have done it without her.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you, now that you've been through, finished your first feature, you've released it, done the whole thing. Do you have a favorite part?
Favorite part of the process?
Yeah.
I think my favorite part was production, honestly. Like, I feel like we really did our homework in a way where when we finally showed up on set, we just had everything in place where we could just be loose and have fun with it. But I think it might be more interesting actually to talk about my least favorite parts.
Yeah, sure.
So no one really prepared me for pre-production, and what a shit show that can be, where something goes wrong every single day. I remember very well, one of our actors had to drop out of the film like a week before we started, and we have a very small cast, and so it was a big deal. And it got to the point, though, where so many things were going wrong and falling apart that I just had to change my mindset, where I was like, you know what? I'm going to expect the worst so that when that happens, I already know how to pivot and go to plan B.
Yeah.
Tell me your take on pre-production.
Oh, pre-production is the worst. I mean, there's so much about it that I love, though. I mean, I love every part of it. I love every part of the process. And there's a lot of prep that I really love, which is just like being in it and thinking about it, but there and making decisions. Like I really love to let like locations tell me something about the movie, right? Like
Okay.
so I love searching for the right place and just and quite like I can't always articulate what I need a space to feel like, but I'm very focused on what a space feels like. And so, you know, we'll just like keep searching and searching for the right space.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about like entering a space and having it immediately, the second you decide on it, I love that moment of like, I no longer can remember the space I was imagining because now I only see the space. And suddenly, you know, the space is telling me something about how to shoot, or it's telling me something about the family, or it's telling me something about the character. And so I really enjoy that. And it feels quite alive.
Yeah.
But after a certain amount of time of just getting in and out of vans, I just get so eager to shoot. There's always that moment of just like, this cannot be going on any longer.
Yes. Well, going off of that the locations thing, in our script, you know, there's like a basement that there's supposed to be a basement that they go into a couple times. And we got to the house and we were asking the homeowner, we were like, do you guys have a basement of any sort? And he's like, no. And we were like, okay, maybe we'll just have to go to another location for that. And he's like, you know what? But we do have this other thing. Let me show you. And he took us outside and under the house, and there was this weird little wooden door that went like 3 levels under the house to the creepiest space you've ever seen in your life. And we were like, that'll work. And so we we retooled that whole section. We were like, it's not a basement. It's this creepy fucking door deep under the house.
Yeah. It's like one of the great excitements of making movies. It's like, it's so alive and just like being open, let something else dictate, you know, just like give yourself over to the process and know what you want and be clear, but also let it breathe, let it tell you something and follow that. And I love that about it.
Definitely. I want to ask you something that just popped in my head. Do you, what's your take on or feeling about reviews? Do you read them? Tell me everything that
I was really good at not reading them for a long time. I used to be able to read them. I'm no longer in the position.
Okay, one more time, you cut out.
I'm no longer in the position to not read them. I read them now. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's great when they're great, and when they're not great, you feel like you're misunderstood, and that's a hard thing to balance. I'm not obsessive about it. I'm not on social media, so I stay off all social media.
Yeah, me too.
It's been pretty funny doing marketing for The Nest because the marketing team at IFC has been incredible for both of us.
Yeah.
You know, they've had to talk me through some very basic stuff about social media, which has been hilarious. I feel like I'm slightly stuck in another time, but I just I don't know. I try not to take it too much on when it's good, great, and otherwise I try to just not think about it.
Yeah. I mean, you've been in a very fortunate position where you make incredible movies, and so they're very well reviewed. But I mean, the reason I ask it is just because, you know, I've had a lot of movies come out over the years that I've acted in, and there's been different levels of anxiety when those movies come out. But it was a whole different thing when a movie that you directed is coming out. And I remember like a week before it came out, I was in a pretty good headspace where I was like, you know what? I made the movie I want to make. I love it. I hope other people like it too. But like, I can't control how people feel. And then the Sunday before it came out that week, I just started spinning. And I was like, what's going on with me? And I think it was just this feeling of like, you know, working on this thing so intimately for 2 years and putting it out in the world, and it's not mine anymore, and just feeling more vulnerable and exposed than I've ever felt in my life, where if people don't like this thing, that means they hate me. and that's a hard thing to take. But I really, you know, I leaned on Allison a lot, who is a superhero that week specifically. And I remember talking to you too, and just kind of another thing that you did for me throughout the process was just being a sounding board where you have just such a calming presence, which kind of makes me just able to process everything in a real way. But yeah, I mean, it's a scary thing putting something out in the world that you've put so much into.
You must have also felt I mean, I've certainly seen this before, being a known actor to make the transition. I mean, that you must have felt a lot of pressure from that, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, in many ways, I like, first off, like a lot of people were very surprised that my first movie was a horror film because of the movies that I've been in as an actor. And so just expectations were not maybe where they should be. And so people were already grappling with that. They're like, whoa, wait, Dave Franco's making a horror film? Like, all right, I don't know how to process this. So like, I remember there were like test screenings that we did where all people knew about the film was that like I directed it and that maybe it took place in the world of like home sharing. And so people would go into these test screenings and we would get okay scores, but then you'd look at the like surveys that they filled out after the fact. And one of the questions was, do you enjoy horror films and do you normally seek them out? And 75% of the surveys said no in all caps. And so it was like people came in expecting one thing from me, and then they get this other thing that they hate. And so we're like, guys, we can't take advice from people who despise the genre. But anyway, I digress.
I think expectation of any sort is really unfair to a movie. I don't read reviews, or I try not to watch trailers too, because I find trailers just give too much away. So when I go into a movie, I want to know as little as possible. And so that's always people going into my movies, they know as little as possible, because I find that, most negative reviews comparisons to something the movie's not, I just find comparison and expectation a difficult part of the process in that sense. And like, instead of just going in with an openness and letting something be just what it is, which maybe also is a part of like my interest in, and one of the things that drew me to your film is that mixing of genres, like playing with expectation and trying to do something a little bit different as opposed to fully delivering on something people have seen time and time again.
Totally. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, guys. How are you? Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
We have about time for questions, if you're good for that.
Definitely.
I actually had a question. While people are submitting questions, use the Q&A button below. I had a question for you both about location. You talked a little bit about location, but picking the right location that informs the story. In both The Rental and Marcy May Marlene and The Nest, like the house is a key part of it. The Rental is basically a cabin in the woods, but you didn't pick a cabin in the woods. You went completely the opposite direction. Can you talk a little about choosing the right house for the right mood? And Sean, with Marcy May Marlene, there's something about where Sarah Paulson and Hugh Dancy live that should be a comforting place, but it's not for Elizabeth Olsen's character. How do you come to those decisions?
Go for it, Sean.
With both of my movies, they're both set in two locations that contrast each other. So very much it was about finding that contrast. And so for The Nest, to find a house that was that is too big for this family and represents Jude Law's character's ambition and his dream, and how this family falls apart because they move into it. And so space is very, very important to that process, and finding that right thing that's not, so big that you lose the audience as soon as you get there. You have to be able to see the promise in it, but it also has to be unsettling enough that it sucks you in and creates atmosphere. And so much of what I look for in a space is the atmosphere. and I find it really hard to articulate. It's sort of what I was saying before. Like I find I can say what I want it to be. I can make a list of things. We can make a plan of what we're looking for. But until I step into it and feel that it's right in my gut, I can't really say anything else about it. Like, it's just something I feel, and I sort of know it when I see it. It's not that different to casting. You know, it's like I can't, say exactly the person that I want it to be, but I'll know it when I see them and I meet them. And I treat the location the same way.
Dave?
For the rental, the house is of course a huge character in the film, and so we really went up and down the entire West Coast looking for the perfect spot, and we knew that we found it with this house because it was on the Oregon coast in this little town called Bandon, and it was perfect because there's so much natural beauty in the area that would draw people to want to vacation there. So you understand why the characters are drawn to it. But at the same time, there's just something kind of ominous about the area too, with the jagged coastline and the fog and the fact that the house really was in the middle of nowhere. Like, it was down this 2-mile narrow dirt road through the woods. And as you can imagine, like, getting these giant trucks with the equipment down there was a full-on nightmare, but it was worth it because you feel the isolation once you're there. And like Sean said, it's more just a guttural feeling where you just, like, you're there and it's like this atmosphere. And I remember when we were in prep, I stayed at the house one night and everything changed once the sun went down, where it's like the house is all these giant windows. And so at night, you really do feel like you're in this fishbowl and you feel like anyone could be watching you at any point. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I feel terrified right now.
Yeah, a lot of those houses don't have like curtains or drapes or anything. And you're always like in the middle of nowhere. Like, who could be watching?
Yeah.
And I can understand why the characters would pick that house.
Definitely.
Because it's beautiful. But yeah, the sun goes down. That's right.
Yeah, one of my favorite compliments about the movie is a couple people have been like, I know that's technically a murder house, but I want to stay there. Like, it looks so inviting.
Yeah. Question for you, Sean, from Jody. I thought the nest was absolutely brilliant. As a script supervisor, I'm wondering if you shot more coverage and decided not to use it, or was your plan all along to stay in the wider shots?
No, there's not more coverage than what you see. I really like to be as specific as possible when shooting, and try to limit the amount of shots, usually to 2 per scene, sometimes 3, but very rarely more than 3. And part of that is a simplicity. I just like a simple approach, and I like to create an environment that gives space to the actors, and where we can really find the scene, and just not let any not let the technical get in the way. Like, I think doing just loads of coverage just kills the chance to perform and keep the freshness in the performance. So I try to stay away from it unless it's very specific.
One quick compliment I want to give Sean is I love how he shoots a dinner scene, where I think most directors see a dinner scene coming up on the call sheet and they're like, oh, fuck, all right, this is going to take all day. We got to get coverage of everyone. And I think all of your dinner scenes are one shot, and you just position everyone in a way where you're getting all the emotion you need, and you don't need to see everyone's faces, and you just get through it, and as an audience, you get everything you need.
Yeah, there's certainly, dinner scenes are certainly challenging. I mean, they're really difficult to figure out, especially when I think you don't want to shoot everyone, and it's just making those decisions of like, what's the important thing for this scene, so that you know what to focus on.
Is there a tip there? What about leaving an empty seat and kind of shooting from that empty seat perspective? I've seen directors who do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's, I always look for whatever the space is and what the scene's about. So, I think the first did, was in Martha. There's sort of Martha's at the dinner table with her sister and brother-in-law. I remembered that taking forever to figure out. And just the simplicity of a single on her and a 2-shot on them became, and it just finding that, like, what the emotion of the scene was about her feeling alone and them together, you know. So it's just like following whatever the emotional thread is too, to try and figure it out.
Right. There's a question for you, Dave, from Aline. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. How did you conceive The Rental? What was your writing process, and did your acting experience help with the character developments?
So the idea was inspired by my own paranoia about the concept of home sharing, and just kind of thinking about how the country is as divided as it's ever been, and no one trusts each other, yet we trust staying in the home of a stranger simply because of a few positive reviews online. And the reality is, you know, while we were filming the movie, there were articles coming out every week about homeowners who had hidden cameras in their places. And then on the flip side, it's like, how do we know to trust the people we're renting to? You know, what's keeping them from renting a place, making copies of the key, and coming back at a later date? And so it just felt like this fun kind of world to play with that we could all kind of relate to.
Giving people ideas. Yeah.
Sorry, say it one more time.
You're giving people ideas.
Hopefully not. Hopefully more just kind of prepping you to be overly cautious. So the writing process, it was a little unique in the sense that, so I wrote it with Joe Swanberg, and he lives in Chicago. And so we basically outlined over the phone for a few months, and then he came out to LA 2 different weeks, and we just holed up in his hotel room, and just basically we had a timeline. We were just like, we have only this time together. We got to crank it out. And so we got through the first draft pretty quickly. And Joe's the perfect writing partner because he just has no ego. He's one of those guys, he'll throw a million ideas at you, and I'll be like, okay, that's the one. I'm going to let's run with that. And, it's amazing because I truly think it's harder to find a writing partner to work with than it is to find a romantic partner almost. So I want to keep working with Joe as long as he'll let me.
Talking of partners, can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your producers or with your directors? So, like, Sean, when you produced a lot of films, what is your relationship with your directors like? And Dave, when you produced Zola, Janicza Bravo's new film, which is getting a lot of buzz right now, what was your relationship there as a producer with her? How do those play out?
I mean,
and on set, you know.
I mean, my approach to producing is always just to support whatever the director needs, to understand the movie they want to make, and then do whatever I can to help them reach that goal. And it's sort of that simple. And just, over the years, every film, it's a little bit different, and requires something different. But it's just following that very basic principle.
I have kind of a similar simple answer of, I was on Zola pretty early on, but then once Janicza came on board, she has such a strong vision that, my job was more just kind of getting out of the way and just making sure as much as I could just to get any obstacles out of her way and just let her do her thing, because she just knew exactly what she wanted to do. And so it was just like, you go do your thing, and I just want to be a cheerleader and be as supportive as possible.
Question for both of you. Saeed asks, are there any tips or key points to ensure your film a place in a film festival? Make a good one, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, and the answer is no. I mean, I think being a filmmaker, it is a life of excitement and disappointment and ups and downs. And I think if you have to find something you want to make and believe in what you're doing, and fight to get it made, and look back and know you've made the best thing you can possibly make. And beyond that, you have very little control over what happens to it. But I think as long as it's your process is about the work and creating the work that you love and believe in, people will respond to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree that it's just like all you can do is try to make the movie that's in your head. And I think the best advice I would give is to almost have no expectations for the film, because, as we were filming ours, I was thinking, all right, in an ideal world, we'll do the festival route and we'll see where it goes. And then we encountered a worldwide pandemic before I even had the chance to do that. And basically we had to just be like, all right, what are we doing now? And we ended up premiering at a drive-in, which people told us at the time. They were like, no one's ever had a premiere at a drive-in before. And it was all scary. But in the end, the kind of mindset that IFC had for our film was, they were like, at the beginning of the pandemic is when we paired up with them, and they said, we think there's power in picking a date and sticking to it no matter what happens, whether theaters are open or not. And what we can do with that is we can actually build to it like an event, and actually just do the right press for it, and just kind of make it this thing that people are looking forward to, as opposed to a lot of these kind of bigger movies that have had to move so frequently. And it's hard to kind of do press for those when you don't know when the movie is going to come out. And so I feel very lucky that I paired with IFC and that we kind of went down the path we did, because as a smaller film, we ended up getting maybe a lot more attention than we would have during normal times. And that's a long way of saying just get rid of your expectations and just kind of go with the flow.
When IFC pitched drive-ins as a venue, what was your feeling about that, and your creative team, your producing team?
I mean, it sounded fun. There's definitely fun nostalgia connected to drive-ins. And I felt lucky that the movie actually kind of catered to that environment and that type of audience, where some movies just don't maybe play as well at a drive-in for whatever reason. But I think horror films in general, they fit nicely into that venue. But yeah, again, I just was like, let's see what happens. I trust you guys. Let's just try to push this thing as much as we can. And it ended up being these drive-in screenings ended up being really fun.
Question for you, Sean, from Robert. Curious to know if there are any updates on the Von Erich film.
Well, thanks for asking. I'm working on it. I mean, the thing that's tough right now is that anything shooting with big crowds becomes more difficult to make. So that's a whole added that's a whole added thing to try and figure out how to overcome. So for a film that deals with wrestling,
right,
it makes it even more difficult right now than it would have been anyway. So but I am actively working on it, so we'll see.
Question for you, Dave, from Saeed. Same Saeed, maybe. Question about acting or directing. What would you say you love the most?
I like the idea of bouncing back and forth, but I will say that I don't think I've ever been as comfortable as I was on the set of The Rental, and I've been trying to kind of think about that. And maybe part of it is because I had a say in every I was able to kind of choose every person who was surrounding me, and so I would just had all these people who I really loved and respected. But I do like the idea of jumping back and forth. It's nice to kind of, I guess, flex different muscles.
Is there a reason you deliberately didn't cast yourself in the film?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, when I first started writing the script, I was sort of thinking, all right, maybe I'll play the role of Josh that ultimately went to Jeremy Allen White. And then when I decided to direct it, I just thought it would be smarter to focus on my responsibilities behind the camera, especially as a first timer. And I'm really glad it worked out the way it did, because Jeremy Allen White is such an incredible actor, and he brought things to the character that weren't on the page that I probably wouldn't have even thought of. And so it played out the way it was supposed to.
Someone has actually preempted my question here, Jeremy, for both of you. directing, good or bad directing tips for someone who's been on both sides of the camera, for Dave, but for you as well, Sean, like first-time director tips, especially directing actors. You're obviously at an advantage, Dave, to know what their headspace is like, but for people who haven't been in the actor's shoes, what tips could you give first-time directors for communicating with your actors?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess the thing I would say that I actually had a really great time with was just identifying how each actor worked, because everyone works differently. And for example, one of my actors would get very existential, and they wanted to talk about one word of dialogue, and we get into it for like 30 minutes and what it means and what it like, how it reflects their history of the character. And I was like, let's do it. Let's get in it. And then there was another actor who barely said a word. He just kind of came prepared, knew what was going on. And whenever he did have a question, I was always like, yeah, what is it? Because he just usually didn't. And when he did have a question, I knew it was going to be super smart. But yeah, it's really just kind of not treating everyone the same, because no one's the same. And yeah.
I agree.
I was going to say the Olivier quote, isn't it? Laurence Olivier said, "Acting is just remembering your lines and not bumping into the furniture."
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dave. Like that's my approach too. Is with each actor, learn how they work, what they want their process to be, and be there for them. And the other thing, the most important thing I think you can do as a director is be comfortable saying, "I don't know." I think you don't always have to have the answer. And it can be, things can go really wrong when you think you do and you pretend you do. But just be confident to say, I don't know, and you know, I'll figure it out. We'll do it together, and lean on the people around you. You can be both a leader of a film and completely open and listen to everyone around you, and you can be both things. So yeah, saying I don't know is a really, really important and difficult. It's difficult to say, especially early in your career when there's a certain pressure that you feel to have answers and to be confident.
We are almost out of time. We're almost out of time. There's a question here about the poster. Mido has a question for you, Dave, about the poster design for the rental. And for you, Sean, for the poster for Marcy May Marlene. Can you talk a little bit about those concepts?
Yeah, so the poster is tricky. I mean, I'm so happy where we landed with the poster, but I guess the thought process when we were conceiving it was, all right, my movie is not a traditional horror movie. There's not jump scares every few minutes. It's not that typical slasher movie. A lot of it really is this tense relationship drama that then kind of evolves into more of a thriller. And so we were like, how do we capture that with a poster? How do we capture that tone? And so I feel like we landed on something that's just like immediately when you see it, you're like, all right, I feel a little off. I feel elements of like, this is like, it's kind of scary, but at the same time, hopefully a little bit artful. And I don't know where I'm going with this. Sean, you go.
I mean, honestly, it's hard to remember with Martha. It was a long time ago. I think what it was there's a lot of talk about the name, and obviously it's hard to remember all her names. So we were trying to look for an image, and I think just the M image was what was discussed as a way to, just create like a symbol for the movie and to put Lizzie's face in that. I think it was kind of that simple. And with the nest, similarly, just a simple approach. Like we looked at lots of designs and different things, but at the end of the day, it came down to just this couple and their environment, and that seemed like the simplest, best way to go.
I feel like I want to end this by saying, because I feel like I haven't talked about The Nest as much as I want to. The Nest is so fucking good. I just watched it again for the second time, and it's giving me chills even just talking about it right now. Like, it's just, Sean is making movies that no one else is making, and he's just making these like very, very nuanced, intelligent movies for adults. And it's just watching it again the second time and seeing how every tiny decision, it means something, and it's all adding up in this way that you're not even conscious of until the end, and you're just like, oh my God. And I just want to like say, as much as I love and adore Martha, The Nest is right up there, and I'm excited for people to see it.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. My last question for both of you, to everyone that does these, is we just would like to hear your pandemic picks for people watching. What should they check out? Can be something old, new, classic, hidden gem, movie, TV.
I can actually, we've been writing down everything we've been watching, so I can just kind of list off a bunch of stuff. All right, the most recent things we've watched: The Witches, Videodrome, Sorry to Bother You, The Thing, Paper Moon, Badlands, I May Destroy You, True Romance, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Truman Show, Moon, Karate Kid, Gremlins, American Movie, the documentary.
Good list.
Paper Moon is one of my favorite movies.
So good.
It's fantastic. Did you say Moon?
Yeah.
It's perfect for pandemic quarantine movie.
Totally.
Yeah. Sean, your picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite new show this year is I May Destroy You.
So good.
Absolutely loved it. My favorite ongoing show is Better Things.
Okay.
I've watched it all. I haven't watched the new season twice, but I've watched it all twice. I just think it's the most beautiful portrayal of family life, day to day, and every episode feels like its own short film in a way. I mean, it's so inventive, and it's just my favorite year after year. But the other thing we've done that's kind of crazy this year is we've rewatched all of ER. So we just 2 nights ago finished all 15 seasons of ER that we started in January. Because it's like one of my favorite shows of all time.
What's the main takeaway after watching it all in just a short chunk of time?
I mean, it's certainly a network show, and falls victim to some, pretty generic moments. But the overall heart of the show is so incredible. There's so much good acting. Maura Tierney is like one of my favorite actors of all time, and her performance in the show is just one of my favorites. And there's some like amazing gem episodes. Like Tarantino directed an episode in the first season.
Oh wow!
It's just so fun. And so there's just all these great little discoveries along the way. Some great cameos. You see some young actors having these one-off episodes, and it was really great to go back and watch the whole thing, which is insane because it's 15 seasons. But
can you really feel the seeds of Clooney's hunkiness?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The seeds of his hunkiness. My picks would be to go way back for everyone and check out Marcy May Marlene on HBO Max. It's there right now. And for Dave to check out all his shorts on Funny or Die. Great examples of getting in and out as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? Or in the case of one of them, in, out, and then out.
Sure. Good way to put it.
But thank you guys for doing this. It's been a pleasure to have you here on the Coffee Talks. Hope you'll come back and do something with us in person next time.
Absolutely. That was really fun, Paul. And Sean, always a pleasure, man. And thank you for everything, dude.
Yeah.
Till then, you both stay safe. Sean, Dave, thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.